You're about to hear a story that almost vanished from American history, a true account of courage, silence, and recognition long denied. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're watching from. Turn up the volume and step with me into history. The sun slipped below the horizon, painting the clouds crimson and gold. October 7th, 1943. High above the Mediterranean, 24 aircraft cut through the darkening sky. The roar of their engines echoed across the heavens as they escorted bombers returning from a mission deep in enemy territory. These were the men of the 332nd Fighter Group, black pilots in a segregated military, the Tuskegee Airmen. To the German pilots who encountered them at dusk, they became known as the Sunset Warriors. Their story begins with a single document, marked classified, filed away, and nearly forgotten. Air Combat Report number 742, dated October 8, 1943. Mission: Bomber Escort over Naples, Italy, filed by Colonel Benjamin Davis, 332nd Fighter Group. Observation: enemy aircraft disengaged upon visual confirmation of our fighters. Conclusion: successful deterrence without engagement. Behind these clinical words lay an extraordinary truth. The enemy was beginning to flee when they saw these men approach, but America wasn't ready for heroes with black faces. Lieutenant Marcus Washington sat in the briefing room at Ramitelli Airfield, Italy. His hands, steady on the control stick of a fighter plane, trembled slightly as he read the letter from home. "They won't serve me at the diner downtown," his brother wrote from Birmingham, Alabama, "even though I wear the uniform of a United States soldier." The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. He was thousands of miles from home, fighting for freedoms his family couldn't enjoy. The morning briefing began at 5 o'clock. The mission: escort bombers of the 15th Air Force to their targets and back. Protect them at all costs. The United States Army Air Forces had been losing too many bombers. Before the Tuskegee Airmen took to the skies, bomber crews called these escort missions the last ride. Captain Isaiah Reynolds studied the map. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice calm but firm, "today we prove ourselves again." He didn't need to explain further. Every man in the room understood what he meant. Every mission was a test. Every success a statement. The United States military had reluctantly allowed black men to fly combat aircraft after years of pressure from civil rights organizations and the black press. The program began at Tuskegee Institute in Alabama. The military leadership expected failure. They were wrong. The men passed every test, overcame every obstacle, and now they were in combat, writing their legacy in the skies over Europe. But their battles weren't only against the German Luftwaffe. Before leaving American soil, Lieutenant James Holloway was refused service at the Officers' Club on his own base. "You can die for your country," a white officer told him, "but you can't have a drink with us." The men carried these wounds into battle. Silent dignity became their armor, excellence their weapon. December 4th, 1943. The first snowflakes of winter drifted across Ramitelli Airfield. Intelligence reports indicated increased enemy air activity. German pilots had become more cautious when engaging bomber formations escorted by the red-tailed fighters of the 332nd. A pattern was emerging. According to mission reports, enemy aircraft would often disengage when they spotted the distinctive red tail markings of the Tuskegee Airmen's planes, especially in the fading light of dusk. But why? The answer came from an unexpected source, a captured German pilot interrogated at Allied headquarters. "The red tails," he said. "They fly differently." "How so?" asked the intelligence officer. "More aggressive, more precise." The German pilot paused. "We were told to avoid them if possible." This testimony never made it into official reports. It was filed away, nearly forgotten. But the men knew. They could see it happening in the skies. The reputation they had earned through blood and skill. Their commanding officer, Colonel Benjamin Davis, himself a Tuskegee Airman, fought 2 wars simultaneously. One against foreign enemies, one against prejudice at home. "We will not fail," he told his men before each mission. "We cannot afford to fail." The pressure was immense. Every mistake would be magnified, every success minimized. But in the air, none of that mattered. Only skill, only courage, only the mission. January 15th, 1944. The mission briefing was tense. Intelligence had identified a significant target, a German aircraft factory hidden in the forests of southern Germany. Bombers would strike at dusk. The 332nd would provide escort. The timing was critical. Sunset meant reduced visibility. Reduced visibility meant increased danger. But it also meant something else, something the German pilots had learned to fear. Captain Reynolds briefed his pilots with characteristic precision. "Stay tight on the bombers until the target is hit," he instructed. "Then patrol the withdrawal route. The sun will be at our backs on the return leg." The men understood. It was a tactical advantage they had exploited before. With the setting sun behind them, they became silhouettes against the blazing sky, red tails glowing like embers in the dying light, a psychological weapon as powerful as their guns. Lieutenant Elijah Carter checked his aircraft one final time before takeoff. His crew chief, Sergeant William Jenkins, was meticulous. "She's ready, sir," Jenkins said, patting the fuselage of the P-51 Mustang. "Bring her back in one piece." Carter nodded. "Always do, Sergeant." The relationship between pilots and ground crew was sacred. The mechanics were the unsung heroes. Black men who ensured the aircraft were perfect. Every gauge, every control surface, every weapon. Lives depended on their work. The roar of engines shattered the morning calm as 16 fighters took to the skies. Their mission would last 7 hours, 3 hours out, 1 hour on target, 3 hours back. One by one, they joined formation, red tails gleaming in the morning sun. If they could see their families back home, what would they say? That they flew for a future not yet realized. That each mission was a statement of their humanity. That they were making history while fighting for a country that hardly acknowledged them. All these thoughts faded as they climbed into the blue. There was only the mission now. The German fighters appeared as expected. 10 Messerschmitt 109s approaching from the north. Lieutenant Washington spotted them first. "Bandits! 10 o'clock high!" Captain Reynolds made the call. "Red 1 and 2, stay with the bombers. Everyone else, let's go hunting." The dance began. Aircraft twisting through 3-dimensional space. A deadly ballet performed at 400 miles per hour. Lieutenant Carter dove toward a German fighter that was lining up on a bomber. His tracers found their mark. The enemy aircraft spiraled away, trailing smoke. But something strange happened next. The remaining German fighters broke off their attack, retreated. Even though they still had numerical advantage, Lieutenant Holloway's voice crackled over the radio. "They're running!" Captain Reynolds remained focused. "Stay alert. Could be a trap." But it wasn't. As the mission continued and the sun began its descent, a second wave of enemy fighters approached. They came in cautiously, tested the formation's response. And then, upon seeing the red tails illuminated by the setting sun, veered away. The bomber crews noticed. "You boys sure put the fear in them," a bomber pilot radioed. The mission was a success. All bombers returned safely, not a single aircraft lost. But the true victory was what didn't happen, the enemy's reluctance to engage, the respect earned through reputation. Back at base, Colonel Davis called Captain Reynolds to his office. "The bomber groups are requesting us specifically," Davis said, handing Reynolds a telegram. "They're calling us their lucky charm." Reynolds studied the paper. Request Red Tail escort for future missions. Highest priority. Survival rates significantly improved. Commander, 869th Bomber Group. It was vindication in black and white, but it wouldn't change everything. Not yet. If this story has moved you so far, leave a like and a comment. Each gesture helps keep these forgotten voices alive. Now, let's return to the battlefield. February 2nd, 1944. Snow covered the Italian countryside. In the officers' quarters, Lieutenant Carter wrote a letter home. Dear Mother, something remarkable is happening here. The enemy is beginning to fear us, not just as fighters, but as symbols. They see our red tails against the sunset and they turn away. Word has spread among their pilots. The bombers request us now. They call us their guardians. It's strange to think that here, over enemy territory, I am judged only by my actions, my skill, my courage. While at home. He left the sentence unfinished. Some truths were too painful to commit to paper, some ironies too bitter. The next mission was announced at dawn. Berlin, the heart of the Third Reich, the longest escort mission yet attempted. Captain Reynolds gathered his pilots. This will test everything we've learned, he said quietly. The enemy will defend their capital with everything they have. The men listened in silence. Berlin meant heavy resistance, maximum danger. But remember, Reynolds continued, they know us now. They've seen what we can do. A smile crossed his weathered face. Let's make sure they don't forget. Pre-dawn darkness shrouded the airfield as the men prepared for takeoff. Sergeant Jenkins performed his usual ritual, a final check of Lieutenant Carter's aircraft, a quiet prayer no one was meant to hear. Lord, bring him back. The mission to Berlin would take 8 hours, the longest continuous fighter escort operation of the war so far. As they reached the bombers, the radio crackled with a familiar voice. Glad to see you, boys, said the bomber group commander. Keep those red tails visible. The formation crossed into enemy airspace at noon. German fighters rose to meet them in waves, dozens at first, then scores. The sky became a chaotic canvas of vapor trails and tracer fire. Lieutenant Washington found himself separated from the group, pursued by 2 enemy fighters. His training took over, a sharp turn, a dive, a climb that bled their energy. Then he was behind them. His guns spoke briefly. One enemy fighter fell away, the other fled. As the battle raged, something unexpected happened. German pilots began targeting any fighter without a red tail. The white escort pilots from other groups found themselves under increased pressure. They're avoiding you, red tails, a white pilot radioed in disbelief. Going after us instead. Captain Reynolds didn't respond. There was no time for conversation. Only the mission. Protect the bombers. Return home. The sun began its descent as they turned back from Berlin. The bombers had hit their targets. Now came the long journey home. As twilight approached, Lieutenant Carter noticed a squadron of German fighters paralleling their course. Watching. Waiting. Enemy aircraft. 3 o'clock, he reported. Not engaging. Captain Reynolds made a decision. He banked his aircraft directly toward them, challenging. The enemy fighters scattered, disappeared into the gathering darkness. In his after-action report, Reynolds wrote simply, enemy aircraft demonstrated reluctance to engage our fighters, particularly during sunset hours when our distinctive markings were most visible. Psychological advantage appears significant. Colonel Davis read the report twice, then forwarded it to 15th Air Force Headquarters with a simple note. Recommend continued use of distinctive markings. Tactical advantage confirmed. Back in the United States, newspapers barely mentioned the 332nd Fighter Group. Their accomplishments were footnotes, their sacrifices an afterthought. But in the skies over Europe, their legend grew. Bomber crews requested them by name. "Give us the red tails," they would say. "Give us the sunset warriors." March 10th, 1944. A group of replacement pilots arrived at Ramitelli Airfield. Young men fresh from training. Lieutenant Marcus Washington was assigned to show them around. "Is it true," one of them asked, "about the Germans running when they see us?" Washington smiled. "It's not that simple," he replied. "They're not afraid of us because we're black. They're afraid of us because we're good." He paused, looking across the airfield where mechanics worked on the aircraft. The best! The new pilots would soon learn what that meant, the standard expected of them, the legacy they were joining. That evening in the officers' club, Captain Reynolds shared a letter he'd received from a bomber pilot. "I watched in awe as your red tails drove away 6 enemy fighters," the letter read. "They turned tail when you approached, silhouetted against the sunset like avenging angels. My crew now calls you the Sunset Warriors. We owe you our lives." The men listened in silence. Pride mingled with the knowledge of what awaited them back home. A country still unwilling to recognize their full humanity, the cruel paradox of their service. April 4th, 1944. Intelligence reports indicated a change in enemy tactics. German fighter groups had been instructed to avoid engaging the red-tailed aircraft whenever possible, especially during sunset operations. A captured document, translated by Allied intelligence, revealed the rationale. The American fighters with red tail markings demonstrate exceptional skill and coordination. Pilots are advised to seek alternative targets when these aircraft are present. Their effectiveness increases during low-light conditions when identification is limited to silhouette and color recognition. Colonel Davis called his squadron commanders together. "Gentlemen," he said, "it seems we've made quite an impression." He spread the intelligence report on the table. "They're actively avoiding us now, particularly at sunset." Captain Reynolds studied the document. "We should use this," he said finally. "Schedule more missions during the sunset hours. Exploit their reluctance." Colonel Davis nodded. "Already approved by headquarters. Starting tomorrow, we focus on dusk operations." The strategy was simple but effective. If German pilots were avoiding the red tails, especially at sunset, then more bombers would return safely if escorted during those hours. Lives would be saved. The mission would be accomplished. On April 7th, 1944, the 332nd launched its first dedicated sunset mission. 24 aircraft took off in the afternoon, joined the bombers over the target, and then escorted them home as the sun painted the sky red and gold. Lieutenant Carter flew on Captain Reynolds' wing. "Look there," Reynolds radioed. 2 o'clock low." Carter spotted them, a group of German fighters, observing from a distance, not approaching, not engaging, just watching the red tails, escorting their charges home. The enemy pilots had learned a hard lesson. Skill mattered more than race. Courage transcended color. The Tuskegee Airmen had earned their fearsome reputation. Back at base, as mechanics serviced the aircraft, Sergeant Jenkins noticed something unusual. Not a single bullet hole. Not one aircraft damaged. "First time that's happened," he told Lieutenant Carter. "They didn't even try to fight." Carter nodded. "They're learning." D. The sunset strategy continued through April and May. German resistance steadily decreased during these missions. The bomber losses dropped dramatically. Lives were saved by the mere presence of the red tails against the setting sun. But as the tide of war turned in Europe, a new challenge emerged. The German Luftwaffe, desperate and diminished, began employing its newest weapon, the Messerschmitt 262, the first operational jet fighter, faster than anything in the Allied arsenal. On May 18, 1944, the 332nd encountered these new aircraft for the first time. Lieutenant Washington spotted them first. "Bogies, 6 o'clock high, moving fast." The jets streaked through the formation, too quick to track, too fast to catch. Captain Reynolds watched them pass. "Stay with the bombers," he ordered. "They'll have to come back through us to hit the big boys." The jet pilots, confident in their superior machines, circled for another pass. But something unexpected happened. As they approached the bomber formation again, they saw the red tails silhouetted against the setting sun. Their attack faltered, became disorganized. One jet peeled away, then another. Despite their technological advantage, the German pilots hesitated. The reputation of the Sunset Warriors had reached even the elite jet squadrons. After the mission, Colonel Davis received a strange request from Allied intelligence. They wanted to interview the pilots about the encounter with the jets. They broke off when they shouldn't have. An intelligence officer explained. "We need to understand why." Lieutenant Carter's statement was included in the report. The enemy aircraft had every advantage: speed, altitude, surprise, but they became hesitant when they identified our unit. "I believe our reputation preceded us." The intelligence officer looked skeptical. "You think they were afraid of you because of your red tails?" Carter met his gaze steadily. "I think they were afraid of us because they've learned what happens when they engage us." The report was filed, then classified. Another piece of history nearly lost. As the war in Europe approached its final stages, the 332nd continued its missions. The men flew, knowing that each success brought them closer to going home, to a country that still struggled with who they were, what they represented. Captain Reynolds received his orders in April 1945. He would return to the United States to train new pilots. Before leaving, he gathered his men one last time. "What we've done here," he said quietly, "goes beyond the war, beyond the missions. We've changed something fundamental." He looked at each face in turn, men he had flown with, fought with. "They'll try to forget us," he continued, "try to erase what we accomplished. Don't let them." Lieutenant Carter stepped forward. "What happens when we go home, sir?" Reynolds didn't have an easy answer. "We keep fighting, different battlefields, same war." The last mission of the 332nd Fighter Group took place on May 7, 1945, one day before the German surrender. As they escorted bombers home in the golden light of sunset, enemy aircraft appeared on the horizon. But they didn't attack. Instead, a German pilot radioed on an open frequency. "The red tails," he said in broken English, "we see you." Then they turned away. A final acknowledgement, a silent tribute from one warrior to another. The war in Europe ended. The men returned home, to an America that wasn't ready to acknowledge what they had achieved. Their story faded, became a whisper, almost lost. June 17, 2004. Nearly 60 years later. A historian discovered a box of classified documents in the National Archives, mission reports, intelligence briefs, interrogations of German pilots, all confirming what had been denied for decades: the extraordinary impact of the Tuskegee Airmen, the fear they instilled in enemy pilots, especially when silhouetted against the sunset. The Sunset Warriors. Among the documents was a letter, never delivered, from Captain Isaiah Reynolds to the family of Lieutenant James Holloway, who was shot down over Austria in the final days of the war. "Your son flew with uncommon courage," Reynolds wrote. "The enemy feared him. His comrades respected him. History will remember him even if our nation struggles to do so now." History did remember, though it took decades. The 332nd Fighter Group was finally recognized with the Congressional Gold Medal in 2007. Many of the original Tuskegee Airmen had already passed away, their stories nearly lost to time, but some remained to receive the long-overdue honor. Among them was Isaiah Reynolds, now 92 years old. When asked about the legend of the Sunset Warriors, the old pilot smiled. "We never called ourselves that," he said, "but yes, It happened. They would see us coming against the setting sun, our red tails glowing like fire, and they would turn away. He paused, his eyes distant with memory. Not because we were black men, but because we were the best at what we did. Another document surfaced in 2015, the diary of a German fighter pilot. It contained a single entry about the Red Tails, April 19, 1944. Encountered the red-tailed American fighters today. We were ordered to disengage. They have become like ghosts at sunset. Red demons against the dying light. The men whisper about them now. They say if you see the red tails at sunset, you will not return. The legend had crossed enemy lines, entered the folklore of the war, a testament to the extraordinary impact of these men who fought for freedoms they didn't fully share, who soared above prejudice in the skies over Europe. The last surviving Tuskegee Airman died in 2022. With his passing, the living connection to their story ended. But the legacy remains. In the documents finally declassified, in the testimonies finally recorded, in the truth finally acknowledged, that in the skies over Europe, as the sun set each day, Nazi pilots learned to fear the approach of black American airmen, not because of the color of their skin, but because of the content of their character, their skill in battle, their courage under fire, their excellence when excellence was the only option. These names were almost erased, but history remembers those who refused to be silent. If you believe their stories deserve to be told, support this channel. Like, comment, and subscribe. See you in the next episode.